Welcome back to another episode of Coaches on Zoom Drinking Coffee. I've got my coffee. Bill's got his tea. Really pleased to finally connect with an old friend who we've communicated many, many times. We've gotten together a few times over the last 5 years, maybe 7 years. And but we haven't had this conversation. So Bill Trayling, it's great to have you here. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I am too, Andy. It's like I said, I met you in 2013 at a Canoe Kayak Canada coaching conference, sat at the same table, and here we are. And it's, we've tangented a few times and wanted to a lot more. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, that's great. So just some context for everybody. You're a canoe kayak coach in the summertime when the lakes are open and hopefully the canoes are allowed in the lake. But you coach in many other capacities as well, and maybe you could fill us in on that.
Thanks. I was fortunate enough to be involved in a sport as a young person, dragged down by my mom to keep me off the streets in the 70s, and ended up at the Mississauga Canoe Club. Worked there after a long paddling career as a high performance coach. For about 5 years, and then was tapped on the shoulder to take on the role of head coach, which had me explore that leadership piece and coaching coaches and working with other coaches. That parlayed into my coach education work, which I'm still doing now with Canoe Kayak Canada and some other Canoe Kayak Ontario, in terms of working with coaches and developing mentoring programs and coaching coaches and running NCCP programs traditionally, and as an LF and a master coach developer. So that's the athletic piece. And then comes the other side, where I've been a teacher ever since 1990s, because I did need a job to support my coaching habit with the funding that was available at the time for canoe kayak coaches, didn't pay the bills. So I ended up getting into coaching other sports and other people and young people, and really discovered that coaching was coaching. And, setting aside the technical piece for canoe kayak, I started to get involved with other sports and realized that my strength was in working that psychological performance piece for young people, both in the classroom and in the field of play. So recently I've started coaching young people, young athletes, and in terms of their psychological performance. So they do have coaches, personal coaches that I work with, but I'm also able to tangent some things that they may not be getting working with their base coach, with their personal coach. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of growing for me, and a lot of, as when you start using the phone and things like this to coach young people from distance, it's very rewarding, but at the same time, it's a lot of work. So that's been a bit of my metamorphosis through coaching and my journey. And, I'm just humbled to keep learning and still keep coaching.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And, you touched on something that's, you and I have had the benefit of seeing in the young people we work with, which is this idea that, I call it greatness travels, which is that, when we see greatness in the athletic endeavor, oftentimes, yes, there are some physical freaks that just are able to have greatness without maybe having all of that psychological package, well tuned. But by and large, the greatness that allows most of those athletes to perform well actually travels into their academic careers, into their life careers.
For sure.
And it's been fascinating, even just doing these interviews, is how many of the coaches I've met who are doing executive coaching and HR coaching and leadership coaching have athletic backgrounds, and sort of underpinning the way that they approach coaching, in an adult or in a business world. So this metamorphosis for you to get into performance coaching outside the athletic realm is, that obviously opens up a whole bunch of opportunities. Mm-hmm. How is that, how are you thinking about that from a business perspective, from a career perspective? How's that playing for you?
Well, it's something that, as I said, I've always, I've had the core work with education, and certainly that's been really busy. So, from from a business perspective, the way this would work is very similar to the consultation work I do with Canoe Kayak Canada, Canoe Kayak Ontario. And it dovetails too. So I can, but the way I would set it up is, just to let it kind of grow slowly. I'm not going to chase it right now, because I've got other work to do. But at the same time, and just make sure that every relationship that I strike is quality. Right now it's word of mouth, and I have a couple of business name ideas. This is just in the beginning stages, but that's kind of where, I haven't really thought of it too much as a business, because it's been such a passion, and it's grown organically out of the work I would do. And in 2013, I was drawn into the US to do some on-site regatta day or race day or performance day coaching. And that's really where this started, because, I wasn't the guy writing the training plan for the athlete, but I would go in, and a friend of mine was their director at the time. And he said, "Bill, you're really good on the day." And, I worked a couple of years with the US right through the Junior Worlds in 2013 in canoeing, and, found that I could draw from my experience, some of the things I read, but also just had an ability to take those ideas and communicate. And that was the thing a couple of parents said to me, and I think you know this with your work, it's when people start seeking you out because of the way you communicate, you have a connection to a certain type of person. And for me, it tends to be young people. And I've been very fortunate, like I said, I jumped into the coaching world in canoe kayak because I was there, and they'd asked me to, step into it. And then I stepped into education and learned a ton about communicating with young people and working with all types of young people, not just the high performance realm. So I'm able to take that and hopefully build a business. I don't know if I answered your question specifically about the business, because that's the thing that I need to work on the most, is being able to establish that business piece and the parameters around it.
Yeah, well, I actually think that you maybe unknowingly actually have hit on probably the most effective business building approach in coaching, which is really that one person at a time, one relationship at a time, serving those people as best you can. I love the idea of coaching by invitation or referral only, right? I'm not throwing out, social media campaigns, trying to trick people into signing up for a course in this or a course in that. The whole point of this podcast was actually to let people get to know coaches around the world who potentially could be the perfect coach to fit their personality and the help that they're looking for. So, I'm not going to suggest in any way that you veer off the path you're on. I think it's the perfect path to find the right kind of connection with the right kind of people. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see that in your work too. I mean, it's interesting to kind of observe from a distance and know you the way I do. And, I don't know specifics around clientele, but it seems, and you could help me with this, what was the thing that had you figure out who, and maybe you're still doing it, who your key clientele is, and the key way to go about having those people find you. I like that better. It doesn't mean we're not advertising, but they find us, and there's a match. It's a relationship match, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually seems so obvious now, but it was a journey to get to it. But it was really about sharing authentically, like a stripped down version of who I am, what I'm about, not being afraid of putting that content out, and also recognizing where my gifts are relative to the sort of life experience that I've had. It's uncanny how many people are attracted to work with me who fit into some part of my life's journey. Right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like somehow they can read the inside journal of my life and see that there's a connection or an empathy that I'm going to have for what they're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's that. I mean, for me, that's the comfort. And one of the young men I work with, he's out at Bonny Beach now. He was in Collingwood, but he just said, "Bill, Coach Bill, you were kind of, the things you talk about connect with me." And that's the piece, right? I think, he sees, and I'm able to relay my experiences, and I do share some, some in a professional way, some pretty raw experiences I had as an athlete with these young people. And they're able to go, wow, you went through this? Because they tend to see you, especially when they've seen you in a technical sense or working with their coaches, running mentoring programs. They see you as a bit of a deity sometimes, and all of a sudden it's broken down, and they're like, wow, I've had this attraction towards the personality, and now I really, really connect and have empathy. I love that word you used, for your experience, and humility and respect. And the greatest thing is when a number of these people get off the phone with me and they're like, thank you, and I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
It's mutual.
Yeah, I love those coaching interactions where you see, that insight, like you see the light bulb go off at some point in the conversation, and kind of the emotional response to kind of like, oh, I finally get it. Like this thing I've been struggling with, I finally get it, and I can see a path. And oftentimes, coaching isn't necessarily about designing out that whole plan for somebody. It's actually just triggering an understanding. You talked about being great on the day. I remember so many days back in the swimming coaching days where you could, you're at the event, athlete is in not maybe their best prepared state mentally, emotionally. A couple little words, a couple little reframes, and all of a sudden you can trigger a performance improvement that was in them all along.
Yeah.
Right? But
that's, yeah. And I'll bet you had that as a young athlete, right? And that's where you had those aha moments, those moments where you went from, I always say it, from zero to hero in no time, right? On site, and had maybe coaches, again, I don't think you'd be a great coach like you are, if you hadn't had some pretty cool coaches. Can you think of any of that that happened that you can use now in your work?
Yeah, I tell these stories all the time, actually. Yeah, I had a sports coach in high school, Dale Huddleston, and he was about 6'6", national volleyball player, turned school teacher, big, strapping guy, quite intimidating. And he had, one of the first meetings of every season, he'd have this line. He said, the only excuse for missing practice is a death in the family. Yours. And it was a line that stayed with me all my career, because that was his approach. But behind that was a guy that would go to the wall for you.
Yeah.
Right. And that was sort of the magic unlocking for me in a lot of ways about coaching, is that if people know that you care, right, then they'll care how much you know. And I think that the quote goes the other way. But they need to know that you come from a place of care before any of the technical knowledge and accolades and all that. And I totally have seen this play out in my professional coaching, especially since leaving sport. Mm-hmm. They don't care about the resume.
No.
They want to get to meet me and see whether I actually care what happens to them, and have empathy for what they're going through. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sure in school teaching, getting through to teenagers, it's got to be the same, right? Like you're just a guy up there that's in the way of them having free time.
Well, yeah.
Connect, right?
I mean, they do show up. I always said two things. You guys are here. I know you're here for two things. I mean, the heat and the free Wi-Fi. Right. But, and then, so that's what we have. And again, more and more to battle in terms of the distractions and the confusions some people have, especially young people around. They're inundated. And I would imagine in the professional coaching world too, executive coaching, like you said earlier, there's so many people with a shingle out. There's so many options, and some of them are really flashy. I mean, I can become pretty flashy, with a few clicks in my camera, and so what we have to do is be able to connect, fairly quickly, but on a very authentic level. And I think what you just described, I mean, the phrase I use is showing up, right? So when they know you're going to be there, regardless of the technical stuff, like I bring some of, I'll throw out 7 books that some of my clients can read, and I say, and I give them a whole bunch of different ones, and I say, go into the books. Sometimes I clean up my library here, and I'll hand the books to the kids, and and that's the type of thing. I have the resources. So and again, similarly in school, I have the knowledge and the background in the subject area, but I don't even go there. I don't even go to the books. I don't even go to the technical stuff before establishing that relationship. And, and that's something, a lot of people say, oh, Bill, you're a natural. And I'm sure, Andy, it's the same with you. You've got this, but it comes from a groundswell of experience. And sometimes that experience for us hasn't been so good. For sure, it hasn't been. There's been our own journey. Mine has been with a lot of pain, thereby awareness, thereby figuring things out, and then you can parlay that into listening. And I think that's where you become empathic and work that coactive piece with the clients. That's something, but again, I'm always thirsty to figure out how I can do better. And it seems that, like you're the same.
I changed the backdrop to the podcast, but I'm going to do a little unprofessional thing and say, like that's my distraction during the day.
Yeah.
I totally get it. And you're right. I mean, I buy oftentimes, 5-6 copies of a book that I'm inspired by, just so I can send it out to clients and make sure that they have the same access to the same information. And, these days it's a little easier with digital and audiobooks and some other formats, but it's just, it's finding that way that in a truly, I don't want to keep using the word authentic, but it's in a truly human to human way that there's a real connection there. And to sell somebody on coaching without that, to me, is actually leading them down the wrong path. Like we can help with tactics and information and all that, but people need that sort of grounded connection with another human to really be able to move through the things that are, maybe getting in their way.
Yeah. And it's being there for them at that crucial moment too. And, and being open. And that's when you talk about the business model, I've talked about, what do I let them text me any time of the day? Do I, a lot of those parameters and boundaries that, once we become connected to that person, what do you do? But I've been able, it's for me, it's worked out organically. I don't know how you work that. You have a structure for sure, because you have other clients, you have a life, I have a daughter and a job outside of this. So how do you manage your time once those relationships are struck and that people are really relying on you and not so much depending, but they're really thriving on your inspiration.
Yeah.
How do you work that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it too has been a bit of an evolution as the coaching business has started to grow quite a bit. Actually kind of put a new system in place in 2020, thinking this was going to be sort of a big, busy, normal year, but who knew?
Maybe.
But it's actually been busier than ever.
Yeah.
And what I did is really sat down and kind of reflected on what are the different activities in my life that are, high priority activities, which ones are energy boosters and which ones are energy drainers, right? You got to do them all, but you've got to find ways to have some balance to that. And I also had to reflect on the fact that, I made some definite mistakes through my professional career in terms of sort of this idea of balance and this idea of getting caught up into the coaching profession, right?
Balance is just more weight on either side, right? It's
exactly,
just add another 45-pound plate, right?
Yeah. And so part of that was actually understanding that if you aren't sort of explicit with the people around you about your schedule and your commitments, it can, this resentment to me is sort of is this emotional thing that is it's almost like the coronavirus in the sense it's this silent little thing that can just kind of grow and grow and grow and grow. And then all of a sudden it shows itself in a really negative and serious way. And so in my personal relationships, going through my coaching career, I didn't really see it, but then eventually it showed up. And
Hmm.
that was from not having allocated my time appropriately in my schedule. So I sat down at the start of 2020 and put like a base calendar into my sort of weekly calendar, which has and this is the order I did it was time to take care of myself. It sounds like a selfish thing, but it's the old analogy of the oxygen
Yeah,
mask,
yeah,
right?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. It's
Um,
necessary.
yeah. So that's, that's my exercise. That's my personal reading time.
Mhm.
Um, so those things get plugged into my week. And then I do, so that's my we bucket. And then I have a we bucket, WE, which is family, partner, very close friends, making sure time is intentionally allocated and clear to everybody on when that is and that I'm committed to that. And then I have you time, which is serving others. So that's where my coaching blocks go. Some business building where I reach out and introduce and get to meet new people. And then I have sort of the everything else bucket, which is taking care of life and,
Yeah.
taking care of the house and doing those things that need to be done. But it really is the order of making sure those things are done and then being very intentional and then using tools. So like when we connected around doing this podcast, you booked into a calendar. Well, you actually only saw times that I had intentionally made available to do
Yeah.
this kind of work during my week. And so I use those tools to help manage the energy, right? The energy in and then the energy out during my week. And it's made a massive difference.
Hmm.
Not just on like a tactical level, but from everybody knows when I'm going to be doing work. Everybody knows when I'm not going to be doing work. We can plan around that. And we do it on a macro scale too. We look at the whole year and plan out some bigger chunks of family time and some trips and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's actually the funny thing is I've published some stuff on LinkedIn about this and people kind of responded and said, wow, you're very sort of detail oriented, and it's actually complete opposite. Like I'm just like, let me free flow and I'm happy. But I needed to know where the boundaries were.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah.
word I just wrote down. I'm taking notes. I'm learning everywhere I go. Right. And
Yeah.
I loved your me, and I'm going to change it a bit. So, cause you said me, then we, and then, what did you say for the serving others? You said you,
You. Yeah.
you. So I love Shakespeare. I'm going to go me, we, and thee.
Yeah. Love it.
There's the alliteration, and then and then the other stuff, right? But I love the intentional piece and the structure around it. I think we're a lot alike. Like again, if we're those artists, but I do need a canvas with edges, or I just keep going, right, with the paint until it's too thin, and then you start, as you talked about, resentment. I literally in my technical coaching, canoe kayak coaching world. I've spread myself too thin, and then you get into resentment, criticism, either from colleagues or athletes that rely on you. And my analogy, and when I coach coaches, I talk about that. We're racing 1,000 meters on a course, and I used to go up and down that Montreal Olympic course on my bike, and I would ride beside every single kid, or some of them wanted me to stop and yell because we're not allowed to coach, while we're moving.
Hmm.
And I would talk about the old self just being blown away at the end of the day, or that one kid you miss, that where you go up and they say, did you see that? And you're like, no.
Hmm.
Or again, so there's that mistake you might make, missed appointment, or the other one is just the people getting a sense that Bill Trailing's time is a little thin. I'm going to start looking around for something else. It's no different than a relationship. And, that's where I've learned a ton through my own journey in human relationships. And sometimes, the lessons are the most painful feelings, and coming out of those painful feelings and the awareness and the patience that develops. And that's where, that's when other opportunities pop up. And that's where this opportunity to coach young people and coach young athletes has come. And it's been phenomenal. Like, because I don't divulge that stuff, but it's there, right? It's there as our, as kind of cornerstone lessons in life. And
Yeah.
but I love the idea that you show up, and I love the idea that you have structure, and I need to learn how to do that a little better. And you know, I retire from education in 2 years, and I'll have more time. But actually, I'll have the same amount of time I have now, but I'll be able to push a little harder, or maybe just be a little more, you know, focused and take on more clients. But
yeah,
loving what I do now, and I want to dig more into, you know, hear more about your stuff. And I have a question for you. What is the thing, you know, the biggest surprise for you, like the pleasant surprise out of the path you've taken into executive and professional coaching?
Yeah. Well, I talk about this, you know, this conference that I went to, you know, quite often. And if you've watched the episodes, people will have heard it, you know, this conference with high performance people from various backgrounds. And, you know, the trigger of seeing that the work we do to bring about people's full potential, of how it is a universal approach that works, whether you're working with, you know, athletes, university students, high school students, or, you know, seasoned professionals. And it was just getting to the point of hearing that feedback from a client where I really didn't have context knowledge of their world, but I could connect with them and help them. I had a conversation yesterday, comes to mind, with a gentleman who's in his, you know, mid 40s, came from an entertainment background, decided that wasn't going to be sort of pay the bills for life, got into data and data science kind of world, and has created this amazing skill set for himself in analyzing data and helping companies understand how to use that data to make better decisions. He was so close to it, right? He's like, he wasn't feeling super engaged in what he was doing, and was considering whether there might be a move necessary at some point. And we talked about his entertainment background and being a musician and having a life, and what was holding him back from making that sort of the profession. And a lot of it was actually understanding the business of the music industry and how to make decisions and how to make money, and, you know, how to release albums in the right way, you know, when he was coming through. And I said to him, like, we're having this conversation, I said, what if what you know now could help the musician who's going through what you were going through, right? And like, you could see the emotion come over him.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know anything about the music industry. I don't know anything about data science, but I knew from listening to him talk about his work, how passionate he was and how skilled he was at being able to do what he does. And he does it for some of the biggest companies in the world. And I just said, imagine if you could help a 20-year-old musician figure out, you know, what's happening on Spotify, figure out where the, you know, the iTunes sales are happening and what that means in terms of, you know, maybe their touring schedule or what have you, right? And so it's those kinds of conversations that make me go, wow, this is really cool. And I'm past feeling any sense of imposter syndrome, you know, which a lot of coaches and a lot of the coaches you and I know from the sports world, I get asked all the time, like, how did you do what you're doing? Because like, it looks really interesting, but I'm so fearful about even knowing where to start. And like, I went through that. In some ways I was thrown into it because I made a decision and just decided I was going to go all in and figure it out. But yeah, it's landing on the other side of that and having those interactions like the one I had yesterday. It's powerful.
The word that came out was wow. And what I literally had a shiver down my back when you talked about that experience and when you said wow. And it took me back to the conversations I've had with one of, you know, the young people I work with. And there's those times, you know, I'll get off the phone and it's good. Like, you know, I've been structured and we've talked about next steps and things, but there are those ones that where you just like have that shiver and it's, wow, that was so good. And you get off the phone and you're feeling like, it's no stroking of my ego. It's more I feel humble to have had that moment where you're able to connect and help that person have their own wow moment. So you kind of, and again, isn't that the essence of coaching, is that combined mutual wow moment, whether it's coaching a swimmer or a paddler or a runner, and you're both like, when they cross the finish line, that embrace or that high five. But, you seem to have that just through that conversation where that person is able to go, wow, yeah. And I love the idea that they might be giving back too. But just helping people understand that their value, I think, again, especially athletes, they're so critical, of themselves, and to understand, to be self-aware, in terms of their power, and be aware that self-criticism is okay. And just to make them have those wow moments, but also have those moments where they just feel like, they feel human and connected. And so all the questions kind of go away for a moment and clarity comes. And I think that's probably what you're doing with that gentleman yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I love modeling this idea of, I call them mashups, which is like, we do this, and I had done a big skills inventory with him. We had tracked, his day-to-day work for a couple of weeks to see what sort of the tasks were that were part of his job, right? Mm-hmm. And so we could see what he was good at, like what he loved to do, and we went through and figured out which ones were his real gifts. And then we kind of park that, and then we go on to this sort of passion side, and the things that he would spend hours doing until 2-3 in the morning, unpaid, just because it's what he loves to do, right?
Yeah.
And what I find in the coaching I do with university students, and even then, sort of when people are going through those mid-career questions, is that they see those as separate worlds, right? They see this like, this is my professional world, and this is my personal world.
I always laugh at that one, but
and
inside,
it's like,
not outside, because you get it. I get it. I'd said that for years, right?
Yeah. So I love when we bring those worlds together, and just explore what that could look like, and the impact that has on people's feeling of what is possible for them. And and this goes back, and I mean, it's really interesting, because I do some work at Queen's University in Kingston. And they have a program that partners with the Canadian Olympic Committee to do athletes that are retiring from Olympic sport, want to try to transition into their career. They are the most complicated students to work with, right? Because they have this, they're still wearing their Team Canada suit, even though they're not, right? It's how they've been seen for the last 10, 15 years of their life. It's the only way they've been seen. It's the way they've had relevance in a lot of ways in their life. And to strip that down and put them into a new context where they feel like a beginner again.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
Right? And that transformation work, I call it transformation work, because it really is, how do you take that greatness, let them feel like a novice again, but then rebuild using the tools that led them to the original greatness into a new context. And that is inspiring
work. Yeah, that's, and again, I can think of my own journey when I retired after, 2 shots at the games, and just how I felt. And I know more now. That's the thing. Like you exist in this shell, this persona, but to be able to take that, to guide somebody through that. I mean, I can't imagine having that. I mean, I kind of did it myself, and I was very fortunate, and ended up fumbling my way into, obviously a career where we all end up where we're supposed to be. But for you to be able to just guide them through that process, and it's amazing. And I know some of the athletes you've worked with, and they loved it, right? Yeah. And they were so, like, the awareness that comes through the coaching. It's not that they wouldn't get there, but it's the efficiency and the effectiveness that you're providing, and that guidance on the side, that handrail when they need it, and then letting it, move out of the way when they don't. And I mean, it's true coaching, really, because it's that support that that you're leading them to. It's got to be rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, look, I count myself as blessed to be able to do this for a living. You nailed it right at the start. There was people that when I tell the story every once in a while that I think it was grade 10, they had careers class. I think it's still grade 9 or grade 10.
Grade 10, I teach it,
Yeah, okay, there you go. So much to my parents, dismay, I listed coach as one of the 2 career paths at that stage. The other one was chef, and I haven't still working on that one. But there was people who made me feel a certain way as a young person, and for whatever reason, I recognized that for what it was, and somehow I connected their behavior to how that made me feel, right? And I somehow could see that. My parents tell me even when I was quite young in our neighborhood, I used to run, I'd organize the street hockey game or the baseball game, and all the little, the kids I was 7 and the other kids were 4 and 5, they would all come to our house because I was like court, right? And so I don't know where that comes from. But I think what we do, and I know that this is part of who you are, Bill, is what we do is make it okay for people to pursue that thing, and to show a path for people to who know that inside them there's something there, but society, parents, whatever, have guided them on this sort of other path. Just kind of unlocking that.
Yeah, and that's where they have that, back to that wow moment. And you mentioned the word impact. What I see you doing is not so much having an impact on people, but I see you coaching them to have an impact on themselves. And you just said is all of a sudden it's okay, or more than okay, to follow something that's been inside them all along or has come up. And again, there's that bit of a handrail that appears and disappears. And that's where that coactive piece is. And I just see you doing that, so that, that's where, I used to hear the word motivation. Motivation to me was always like, that coach that's riding beside the athlete, plugging the key into the lock such that if they weren't there, everything falls apart. Been there. But there's the word inspiration. And that's, to me, what I can do, where I always think of Chariots of Fire, where the coach didn't even go, right? He held his watch, and that's the Chariots of Fire coach versus, I have names for the coaches based on legendary coaches from canoe kayak, but the Chariots of Fire coach is what it seems like you're doing with these people, where it's just like you allow them to find something that's a gift in themselves that they wouldn't have seen. You're just helping clear the clutter a little bit, really not motivating, right?
No, look, I've always seen motivation as sort of what happens once you've taken action on something that inspires you, right? So those that sit around waiting for motivation to show up, right, tend to sit there for a long time, right? Finding inspiration, most people have those things inside them already, right? And so it's bringing those out and then giving them a glimpse on how to make those things possible, and getting them to take those first couple steps. Then the motivation is there, and they really don't need me. They can come back and ask for guidance or advice. Happy to do that. But once that light goes on, as you and I know, doing what we do, it's hard to turn it off, right? It's not a question of seeking motivation. It's a question of actually like, okay, I do need to sleep at least a few hours and stop this project I'm working on. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to your example of the gentleman. That was the artist and the data guy. Like, you found a way to synthesize what he's good at, but also identify. And this is another thing I hear that you did, was you identified a market. And that's something that a person I read, Tina Seelig out of Stanford, always talks about. You can have a passion, and I say this to kids all the time. like, I play this thing up, in economic class or careers class, don't follow your passion. And I mean, you're a bit hyperbolic about it, but the point is, like, have a passion, but be able to identify a market. And I believe, that whatever your passion is, there's a market for it. It might take a little more work to figure it out. You might have to morph a bit, but yeah, that's what it seems that you did with that guy. I really, really found that connection. I had a good feeling inside that, about that story.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited to see where we go.
Yeah.
We got a couple more coaching sessions to sort of see, do a little job searching, see what shows up. But I have no doubt that his mind has been open to so much more possibility, and just, you could see him lift in the conversation in terms of the hope that he had for something that would really have that purposeful impact, right? And so, I'm excited to see where that goes. And
yeah,
I appreciate you noticing that the impact piece for me is the only thing that really matters. And whether it's the impact that the individual can make, or, as you will know, working in a school, it's the impact that those young people are going to have on many other people in their lives.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what we're doing this for.
Yeah. I mean, it's madness. I call it mad making a difference. And I say, the only reason I'm here is so you can make a difference down the road. And I love the word you just used, hope. And you create hope in people. A lot of coaches, like even in athletic, like, that's a word that sometimes people see as weak, but I see it as such, like, if you can inspire or create hope in someone, they've got their own fuel. And the other word you used was possibility. And I think we have incredible possibility, especially with what's going on now and the shift. I'm a believer that, that normal wasn't working. And we with COVID-19 and, the confluence of that with what was going on in our world anyway, there's an opportunity for us and for coaches, not so much a business opportunity, but a true opportunity for people to I don't know, you could share a little bit. I don't know how much more time we have, but about that whole opportunity there is out there, and also the need for people to be coaching each other now, right? And in inspiring and supporting each other. You see it all the time in little snippets around, people out with signs and everything else, but you also see people. I think there's going to be a real opportunity for more good work to support people, either through this or after this.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because I had started to see that before COVID showed up, for sure. And that's probably because I have this lens into this sort of postgraduate studies world, with some of the coaching I do at Queen's. And the interesting thing in that group as well is we're about 50% international students and 50% domestic students. And there's something striking about a 24-year-old from Afghanistan or from Iran or from India who's so grateful to be given the opportunity to be, in Canada, in a great school, in a great program. And when I say the words hope and possibility, they've taught me that in the last few years. They've taught me that what's most important for young people right now, especially people coming from less than privileged backgrounds, is the sense of hope and possibility for them, but also to be able to take that back to where they've come from and impact others there. And what's encouraging to me right now is that these young people are really demanding that of the education institutions and of their employers, that we need to stand for something more than just making money. I had a student say to me the other day, he just finished negotiation class in our business school, and he hated it. And I said, "Oh, why did you hate it?" He said it was all about one side winning and the other side losing, right? And as much as in the real business world there is negotiation that needs to happen, I think the proof is that approach over the last, let's say, 50 or 70 years hasn't worked out so well. Those that have won the most have benefited greatly. Those who have lost the most are now stuck in this survival mode that, we're having to basically rally our entire economy to try to help people survive. And not their fault. That's really the system's fault of
Yeah.
having created that.
It's a zero sum model,
Yeah,
and that it works for the winner for a while,
for a
but the
while.
winner always becomes the loser. And I always said that about, the stock market, casinos, anytime. Like you gotta, it's not only in your heart to consider when you win that someone's losing, but what other possibilities are there? Where's that 1+1 is 2.5, where it's you and me, and we get 2 plus the half is the ideas in between us, right? And yeah, so that zero sum, I think it's never worked, but it's never been more apparent how it doesn't work. And now I think, a huge opportunity for coaching people through that win-win, right? That Covey would talk about, or, that idea that we all get to win, right? No better day than Earth Day today, maybe, to think about that, right?
Absolutely, right? I mean, if people aren't, yeah, if people aren't noticing that, the air is a little fresher. I was down at the lake this morning. Lake's
Yeah.
looking a lot cleaner. We can make adjustments to how we live to sustain some of that, for sure.
I like what you just said, adjustments, because a lot of people are thinking you got to throw everything out, and or this is where this whole dilemma now is about the economy versus people's lives. Like, you don't need to, it doesn't need to be polarized, like our world is a lot. A polarized decision. You can have win-win. You can make adjustments, and not quite get there, but eventually get there. We're on the path, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I am encouraged, honestly. I work with a lot of employers and a lot of, leadership people who, what's happening is that the market of talent is basically driving companies to have to change the way they operate. Because
sure.
Young people, millennials kind of get thrown under the bus for their attitude and their approach. But the reality is, if we're honest, as older than millennial generation, we kind of wish we had the guts to stand up the way they're standing up for things, right? And to expect their employers to treat them in a fair and respectful way, and to have flexibility for a lifestyle, to be able to go and take care of their sick dog on a day and not get in trouble at work to have to do that. Like simple things, right? Human things. And I think that change of mindset of these young people is driving systemic change in corporate culture, around issues like diversity and inclusion, around issues of what does the workplace look like and how do we operate. And I think this may have been the final straw, in the sense of the corporate people always pushing back, saying, well, we can't run our businesses that way. Well,
yeah.
Now they have.
Well, I mean, the education world I'm in, I mean, look at political for a moment. The big fight with Ontario recently was, online classes and class size. And, I'm building something now for Canoe Kayak Ontario, where I'm going to run an NCCP course, and it's scalable, 1 person, 50 people. And, in education, I mean, certainly there's a lot of, it was too quick, right? And a lot of kids, in my area don't even have, they're on dial-up, but we are figuring it out. And isn't that the essence of, like, think about, you mentioned earlier the word adjustments. You look at coaching, you look at people coaching themselves and reaching out for coaching. I got a Google Classroom call 15 minutes later on with some some people that know what's going on, because I have questions. Like, we're all figuring it out. And that's what those millennials were going to have to do anyway. And now, that crust at the top that kept making excuses for not changing their corporate structures, it's fallen apart. And, what a great time, like you said, you've got these young people now that have the wherewithal to survive and thrive, and sing for their supper, so to speak, as they would have to without the pensions and that. But now, what a great opportunity, like I said earlier, not so much, opportunity financially, but opportunity to do that good work like you're doing, and I'm doing it with some young people who are in athletic world, but it's not about sport for those people.
No.
But what a great opportunity for you and your business, working with those Queen students, to let people, like, just basically sit back and say, now I'm able to guide you, and a lot of that crust, a lot of that caste system is doesn't work, right? It's proven not to work, and you know, strike while the iron's hot for sure, and get us back, you know, into a new world. I think where I think coaching is going to be really valuable and valued.
Yeah, and I totally, we should probably wrap up on this, but I
Okay.
totally have
I knew you were going to get that with me.
Well, no, yeah, and I appreciate it. Maybe we'll have to do episode 2 and 3. But I totally have seen this shift in, you know, I actually had a retired, like a seasoned corporate executive reach out to me about maybe a year and a half ago now. And she was looking for, her question was, I need you to help me understand how mentorship works with this new group of young people coming up, because her experience had been, I attached myself to one person, right, for 20, 30 years, and that's my mentor. Young people now, they're going to 20 people for advice. They're going to each other for advice. They're creating little groups to talk about things, right? And I think it's great. What they need, and where coaches can come in, is just, you talked about the guardrails or the edges of the canvas, right? Is just keeping them on a path, helping them with a perspective that's separate from where they are, much like the gentleman I spoke about the conversation yesterday. All I did was see what he was telling me, and play it back to him in a different way. And I think there's going to be massive opportunity for coaches to be able to help support people in many different unique ways. And I love that peer-to-peer part as well, that, you know, matching young people with other people to help them guide each other through their career. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I do that. I mean, that's one of the things I do with coaches is I have them go and, you know, observe and sit with other coaches. And that's where even this athlete, having them identify the strengths in other athletes and go and watch other athletes. I literally have a thing where I have an athlete pick an international star, you know, a world champion, or somebody out there. And I said, who are you? Who are you? And this, you know, they'll also pick someone, not so much to idolize, but I have them go through metrics and everything else. But that's the thing, like, and again, to close it out, those young people you're working with, it seems like you can identify the, a number of different people they could look at as mentors or models. But again, and then they have you guiding them in terms of how to access those, you know, the inspiration, the skills, the modeling, and what a perfect situation those young people are in, or your clients are in. Even the woman that you said, you know, the how to is really what coaching is going to be about.
Yeah, that's my phone going off. Just a second.
Okay.
The joys of life.
Oh no, I get it. I get it.
That'll teach me. Yeah, I actually want to let's wrap up on that, but I want to just tie in a story from when I was doing the coaching education programs back at swimming. We introduced a little different model where, when we were introducing, especially the new coaches coming into the coaching profession, we'd have them sit at a swimming pool and watch the swimming lessons that were going on, as if they were the parent of a kid who walked out through the change room doors, and they would track them for the half an hour lesson. And they would realize that when they're in the water there doing the coaching, or when they're on deck coaching, to understand what their customer is looking at and what their customer is seeing. And that perspective was a game changer for a lot of coaches to understand. And I remember my oldest daughter, when she was 3, having her first sort of organized sport activity. You know, I'd been coaching for maybe 15 years at that point. And I went and watched her in a little gymnastics class with maybe 12, 15 other kids. And I remember about 2 minutes in realizing that I was so laser focused on what she was doing. I had no context that there was any other kids involved. All I cared about was whether those coaches were talking to her, whether she was safe, you know, whether she was getting corrections. And that changed the way I coached from that day forward, in terms of, like, there's an art to what we do, but there's also an audience and there's a customer. Mm-hmm. you know, it all plays into it, right? And so
For sure.
that was a fun exercise that we introduced that I think really impacted a lot of young coaches.
Yeah, it's interesting when you ask young coaches, who's the client? And you get a really interesting, and I do that in class, right? And yeah, you get interesting responses from the young coaches particularly because, yeah, it's, that's a good exercise. I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to have them do that as I'm building online now for even Nova Scotia, BC, and Ontario for these coaching courses. You know, the opportunities are huge as far as spreading stuff out and having them do different stuff in the communities. So thank you
Absolutely.
for that.
Yeah, no worries. All right, Bill. Well, episode 1 done, and we'll definitely catch up and talk again near future.
Andy, I'm honored. It's been a pleasure, and you have a great day, and I keep doing what you do really well.
Thanks, Bill. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.